Shabbat Shalom, everybody. Once again, it's Rashbi in the house. Rabbi Stephen here with another Devar Torah. And again, thank you all for tuning in and listening. And some great news. Saturday, we had a minyan. Thank you to everybody who showed up. We actually got to get the Torah out and read from it. Beautiful experience. And I also have to do a shout out Friday night to Jack Mangan and Ilana. Lana brought her violin. It was beautiful. Jack showed up with his guitar. We also had, I guess it's called the Congo drum. The bongos are where you have the two. But it was a beautiful service. The violin just added so much to it. So thank you very much for coming and doing that. And we look forward to more such services where it's musical accompaniment. You know, services are there to be inspirational. Okay, it's to help separate all the material things that you do through the week, going out and dealing with a job and making money and taking care of your family, doing stuff around the house. And Shabbat is just a break from that. It's like to come in and just, realize why you're doing it and what your lives are all about and connect with Hashem and connect with all the other congregants and say prayers that are going to lift up your spirit. If you look at the Psalms, there was so many references to musical instruments. The most notable is the Sabbath Psalm, with the music of the lute and the harp. Well, those instruments are mentioned in those Psalms because those are the instruments that were used to accompany that Psalm in the days of the temple with the Levites. And there were some specific Levites, the Asif, sons of Asif, that were specifically there to do the music. So it was just beautiful, and I'm glad we can carry on in that tradition. So this week's Torah portion, Pinchas. Pinchas was Aaron's grandson. He was the son of Eliezer. Now in last week's portion at the end, Balaam was thwarted in his attempts to curse the Israelites, so he and Balak, the Moabite warrior who became king, devised a new plan to try and contaminate the Israelites with sin, right? So they brought in the Moabite princesses that came and seduced some of the Israelites, and one such person, Zimri, who was, I believe, from the tribe of Shimon, was very, what's the word? He was just right out there. He had absolutely no qualms about being with one of the Moabite princesses, and Pinchas took care of it. He ran him through with one spear when they were together. And that's how last week's portion ends. This week's portion starts from there with Pinchas being basically honored. And Hashem's like, because he cared so much, now he has just sealed the lineage of the Kohen Gadol. So future Kohen Gadols, high priests, will come from his lineage. Not unlike the Levites who secured their place as the ministers of the temple, because when some of the Israelites and some of the rabble from Egypt went off and desecrated, the name of Hashem by making a golden calf as kind of an idol or representation of Hashem or of Moses, it was the Levites that took out their swords and made short work of those rebels, right? So that's how Pinchas earned a place. The other part of it is, and Hashem declaring that, is saying there will be no retribution from the house of Zimri or from the tribe of Shimon. What he did was correct. Okay, those people were trying to corrupt the Israelites, and he took care of them. And that's why we have a lot of the commandments that we do. That's why on Yom Kippur, for example, we talk about forbidden relationships, because because the basis of society is the family. And the family has to be very moral, has to be an embedment of morality. So that's why that was so important. So let's skip ahead in the portion, as long as we're talking about morality. Okay, who are the guardians of morality in Judaism? The woman. So when you get right down to it, Judaism was having a Me Too movement 3,000 years before this Me Too movement, before even the Equal Rights Amendment. We discussed that a little bit with some of the kids, and one of the kids who's being bar mitzvahed had no conception of what the ERA was, the Equal Rights Amendment. Remember, it was proposed in the 1970s. In order to become a constitutional amendment, it had to be ratified by 2/3 of the states. Well, Illinois just ratified it, about 30 years late, but I think we have one or maybe two more states left, and it becomes part of the Constitution. Okay, well, in Judaism, this has been part of our Torah since the beginning of the Torah. That women are the bedrock of the home. Now, on that vein, another important part of this particular portion are the daughters of Zelosphahad. Now, who was Zelosphahad? A few portions back, there was a reference to someone who was out gathering wood during the Shabbat, and he had been warned, and let's make no bones about this. It talks in the Torah that this person was given capital punishment. He was put to death. In order to do that, and we have to emphasize that, even though it doesn't say it in the Torah, remember, there's an oral Torah that fills in the gaps. And the gaps were, this person was warned, persisted in it anyway. Two witnesses saw it and came forward and testified that this person was out there gathering wood, and when they confronted him, he had absolutely no relenting, no idea that, okay, what I did was wrong, and, I should, make amends. None of that. He was very adamant in the fact that this is what I want to do, so capital punishment. The sages connect the dots and say that was Zelosphahad. Now, in the Talmud, one of the sages mentions it. So, well, Zelosphahad was out there gathering wood, and now his daughters, he died without sons, and this is what we're coming up to. He only had 4 daughters, okay? So the other sages took that sage to task, saying, look, the Torah doesn't mention this person's name in order to spare him or his family the embarrassment. Why do you out the guy, all right? So it's kind of taken for granted that that's who Zelosphahad is, because the daughters of Zelosphahad approached Moshe Rabbeinu and said, our father died of his own sins. And this is after the rebellion of Korach, of Dathan and Abiram. This was after the infestation of the Moabite princesses to try and corrupt and bring the Israelites to depravity and immorality. Right? And they said our father died of his own sin. So he wasn't part of that. So you connect the dots, and okay, this was Zelosphahad who was out there gathering the wood that time, and he had capital punishment. So the daughters were very righteous. And we talk about the idea that the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. Well, in this case, it did. Okay? And again, the Talmud says that when you have kids with parents who are corrupt or morally depraved or just not there, and yet they lead a righteous life, that speaks more of the character of the offspring. So the daughters of Zelosphahad approached Moshe Rabbeinu and said, basically, our father died of his own sins. He left no sons. You're talking about the passage through generations of property. What this is saying is that our family will lose their property. What's going to happen to it? And Moshe Rabbeinu goes into his tent, and he goes to God, and God says, the daughters of Zelosphahad speak right. And the Hebrew is Cain Benot Zelosphahad. Now, this is interesting. Last week we talked about the first usage of the word Satan, obstruction. This is really kind of the first usage of the word Cain. Back in biblical time, and for those of you who understand a little bit of Hebrew, the word Cain means yes. Right? Ata medaber ivrit, do you speak Hebrew? Cain. Cain, ani medaber ivrit. Yes, I speak Hebrew. Okay? In the Torah, there was no word for yes. When people ask you a question, you acknowledge the positive by just repeating the question. Do you speak Hebrew? I speak Hebrew. That was yes. See? So Cain is actually kind of a modern Hebrew type of a word. But Hashem says, yes, the daughters of Zelosphahad speak right. Now, this is the second instance in the Torah where one of our commandments came from the people. The first one was the time when the people came to Moses and said, hey, we're contaminated. We handled the corpse during Passover, so we were not able to partake in the Passover sacrifice or the feast. So we're doing a mitzvah, and yet the consequences is that we don't get to enjoy with the rest of the congregation. So Hashem said to Moses, you know what? They're right. Let's have a second minor. It's a minor. It's just the feast. That's all we do. We have a minor Pesach 1 month after the main Passover, so that these people who happen to be contaminated from handling a corpse, which was a mitzvah, a person's last actions, and let's allow them to enjoy the feast. We'll do it a month later, so that it's on the 15th, so we know when it was, right? Full moon, and also because it's far enough away that the contamination isn't an issue. So now we have a new succession of property. Okay, first is the sons. First son gets the double share. And by the way, the daughters are looked after. They may not get a share, but the sons have, if you have an unmarried daughter, they have to take care of them. The next succession after sons is daughters. So the daughters get the property, and therefore it stays in the family. So because the man didn't have any, or the man and woman did not have any sons, they still, the property still stays in the family. You still have that ancestral. And then there's another line of succession there. So that was really kind of an important thrust there. The other two parts of the service of the portion is that there was a census. You know, after whenever, because of all there was some killing, there was some lives lost. So Hashem wanted to see who was left, and this is because He loves us. The other part is they talk about the sacrifices over the different holidays, starting out with the new moon, which back in the days of Israel was actually a minor festival. Whenever you had a new moon, you had a new month, it was sort of a festival. And even today, when we do the service, when we have a new moon, there's an extra musaf, a specific musaf. Musaf is the additional service. The reason we do that on Shabbat after the Torah service, the musaf, is this represents the additional sacrifice. Okay, that was done on Shabbat, that was done on some of the festivals. There was an additional sacrifice done on the new moon. And then it talks about the other sacrifices. So, thank you very much. Hope you had a good week. And by the way, happy 4th of July, secular holiday. We're blessed to be living in a country that allows us the freedom to express our religion. Thank you very much. See you in services, and thanks again for listening.